I never told my son what I kept in the storage locker downtown. When he married Sienna, I made sure she'd never find the key. While I was visiting my sister in Halifax, my son called me in a panic. "Dad, she found your storage unit. She's there right now with bolt cutters." I'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years, so I put my plan into action. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment which Canadian city you're watching from. I was sitting in my sister Margaret's kitchen in Halifax when my mobile rang. The pot roast was in the oven, and we'd just opened a bottle of Nova Scotia wine when I saw Michael's name flash across the screen. My son never interrupted family time unless something was wrong. "Michael?" I answered, already feeling my chest tighten. "Dad, I don't know how to tell you this." His voice was shaking. "Sienna found your storage locker, the one downtown on King Street. She's there right now." "Dad, she has bolt cutters. The manager called me because your name is on the lease, but she told him she's your daughter-in-law and you gave her permission." The wine glass stopped halfway to my lips. 12 years. 12 years of keeping that unit secure, of protecting what Catherine had left behind, of waiting for exactly this moment that I knew would come eventually. "Has she gotten inside yet?" I kept my voice steady, though my sister was staring at me with concern. "I don't think so. The manager is stalling her, saying he needs to verify with you first." "But Dad, she's furious. She's screaming about her rights as family. What's in there that she wants so badly?" "Everything," I thought. "Every document, every safeguard, every piece of proof I'd need for this exact situation." "Michael, I need you to listen very carefully. Call the police. Tell them someone is attempting to break into my private storage unit without authorization. Then call our lawyer, James Chen. His number is in my desk drawer at home. Tell him it's time." "Time for what?" Behind him, I could hear Sienna's voice, sharp and demanding. "Is that your father? Tell him I know he's been hiding things from us. Tell him I have a right to know what's in our family's storage unit." "Our family?" The words made my jaw clench. "Dad?" Michael's voice was small now, uncertain. "What's going on?" "I'm booking the next flight back to Toronto. Don't let her into that unit. And son, there are things we need to discuss. Things your mother made me promise to tell you when the time was right." I hung up and immediately pulled up Air Canada's website. Margaret watched me, her expression a mix of worry and understanding. She'd known Catherine well, had been at her bedside those final weeks when my wife had made me swear to protect our son. "It's happening, isn't it?" Margaret said quietly. The girl finally showed her true colors. I nodded, fingers shaking as I typed in my credit card information for a flight leaving in 4 hours. Catherine called it 12 years ago. Said someone would come along who'd see Michael as a paycheck instead of a person. The storage unit had been Catherine's idea, actually. 6 months before the cancer took her, when she was still clear-headed enough to plan, she'd insisted we rent it, not for furniture or old belongings, but for something far more important. "I won't be here to protect him," she'd said one night in the hospital, her hand skeletal in mine. "But I can protect him anyway. We'll put everything important in a secure location. The trust documents, the will, copies of all our financial records. And Richard, I want you to write it all down. Every red flag to watch for, every tactic manipulators use. So when someone comes along and Michael can't see it, you'll have proof. You'll have everything you need to save him." I'd thought she was being paranoid at first. Our son was only 26 then, smart and capable. But Catherine had grown up watching her own mother lose everything to a stepfather who'd married her for money after her dad died. She knew how these things worked. So we'd done it. Rented a climate-controlled unit downtown, filled it with documents that outlined every protection we'd put in place. The irrevocable trust that held our house in North York, our investment portfolio, the life insurance policy, all structured so that only Michael could access them, never a spouse. And I'd kept a journal, 3 years' worth of observations about Sienna. Every red flag, every manipulation, every time she'd pushed boundaries or made calculated moves toward our family's assets. I documented it all, knowing that someday I'd need proof to show my son what I'd seen from day one. That day had finally arrived. The flight back felt endless. 4.5 hours of turbulence and terrible coffee while I replayed the past 3 years in my mind. I'd known something was wrong the first time Michael brought Sienna to Sunday dinner. It was October, 3 years ago, and he'd been glowing with that particular light that comes from new love. "Dad, I want you to meet someone special." Sienna had arrived dressed immaculately. Designer yoga wear that probably cost $300. Her blonde hair in an artfully messy bun, carrying a bottle of wine that I later looked up cost $85. For a first meeting with a boyfriend's father. "Mr. Morrison, it's such an honor," she'd said, her voice honey-sweet. "Michael has told me so much about you. And this house, my goodness. North York, right? These properties must be worth what now? Over $1 million? First red flag. Who asks about property values at a first dinner? Throughout the meal, she'd peppered me with questions disguised as polite conversation. What did I do before retirement? Insurance? How interesting. That must have been lucrative. And Michael mentioned you'd been married before? I'm so sorry for your loss. Did your wife work as well? She was assessing, calculating, building a financial picture of our family. And Michael, poor Michael, couldn't see it. He just saw a beautiful woman who was interested in his life, in his family. Over the next 6 months, Sienna's tactics became clearer. She'd started suggesting that Michael should talk to me about financial planning. Didn't he want to know what he stood to inherit someday? Wasn't it responsible to understand the family's assets? Michael had mentioned it to me one Sunday. "Sienna thinks we should discuss your estate plan, Dad. She says couples need to understand their financial future together." They'd been dating 8 months. "Your future with me is that you build your own career and savings," I'd said carefully. "Just like I did. Just like your mother did." I'd seen the flash of annoyance cross his face. Sienna had been working on him, making him feel like I was being secretive, controlling. When Michael told me he was going to propose, my heart sank. The ring he showed me cost $12,000, money he'd saved from his job at the investment firm downtown. I'd seen the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability of a man in love. "I'm happy for you, son," I'd said, and I meant it. I wanted Michael to be happy, to have what Catherine and I had shared, but I also knew Sienna couldn't give him that. The wedding had been excessive. Sienna had insisted on the Fairmont Royal York, a venue that cost $60,000. Flowers cost $18,000. Her dress cost $12,000, and she'd bought 3 different ones for the reception, claiming she needed options for photos. Michael had struggled to pay his share, too proud to ask me for help. I'd given them $30,000 as a wedding gift, watching Sienna's eyes light up as she calculated what that meant about my total net worth. But I'd also done something else. I'd called James Chen, the estate lawyer Catherine had worked with, and made sure every document was ironclad. Then I'd insisted on a prenuptial agreement. "It's standard practice for families with estates over a certain value," James had explained to them both in his office downtown. "Nothing personal, just protection for assets that existed before the marriage." Sienna had signed it with barely a glance, probably thinking it was just a formality, that she'd have years to work around it, to convince Michael to change things. She was wrong. After the wedding, things escalated. They'd moved into Michael's condo near the distillery district, the one he'd bought before meeting her. Within 2 months, Sienna started complaining. It was too small, too noisy, too far from her yoga studio in Yorkville. "We should move in with your dad," she'd suggested to Michael, loudly enough for me to hear during a Sunday dinner. "Look at all this space he's not using. And Richard, you're getting older. Wouldn't it be nice to have family around?" I'd shut that down immediately. The house stays as it is. When I'm gone, it'll be Michael's to do with as he pleases. But while I'm breathing, it's my space. Sienna's smile had frozen on her face, and I'd seen the calculation behind her eyes. She was running through alternative strategies, trying to figure out how to access what she wanted. That's when I started the journal. Every conversation, every manipulation attempt, every red flag. I documented it all in a leather notebook that lived in the storage unit downtown, updated every week. The plane finally landed at Pearson just after 9 p.m. I grabbed my carry-on and headed straight to the long-term parking garage, my phone buzzing with texts from Michael. "Police came." Sienna's furious. "Says you're paranoid and controlling. She wants to know what you're hiding from her. Dad, can we talk when you get home? I'm confused about all of this. I drove through Toronto's evening traffic. The CN Tower lit up against the dark sky. My mind racing through what I needed to do. First, check the storage unit. Then, get James Chen involved. Finally, sit Michael down and show him everything. When I pulled up to the house in North York, both their cars were there. Michael's sensible Honda and Sienna's BMW X5, the one she'd convinced Michael to co-sign a loan for 9 months after the wedding. $82,000. The payments were $1,400 a month, money coming out of Michael's paycheck, while Sienna contributed nothing. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering strength. Catherine's voice echoed in my memory. You're stronger than you think, Richard. Protect our boy. The front door opened before I could turn my key. Michael stood there looking exhausted, his tie loose, his usually neat hair disheveled. My son, who rarely showed stress, looked like he'd aged 5 years in one day. Dad, he said quietly. She's waiting in the living room. Behind him, Sienna appeared. She was dressed casually, jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost $400. But there was nothing casual about the way she carried herself. She looked like someone preparing for battle. Richard, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, we need to have a conversation about trust and transparency in this family. I stepped inside my own home, the home Catherine and I had bought 40 years ago when North York was still affordable. The home where we'd raised our son, where every room held memories of our life together. Yes, I said calmly. I believe we do. We sat in the living room, positioned like pieces on a chessboard. I took my usual chair, the leather recliner Catherine had given me for my 60th birthday. Michael perched on the edge of the sofa, looking like he might bolt at any moment. Sienna claimed the other end, her posture perfect, controlled. Let's be direct, Sienna said, not waiting for anyone else to speak. I know about the storage unit downtown. I know you've been keeping things from us, from your own family. Financial documents, property records, legal papers that affect Michael's future. That's not just secretive, Richard. That's controlling. Documents about family assets are kept secure, I said evenly. That's responsible, not controlling. Secure from your son? She raised an eyebrow. Or secure from me? The question hung in the air. Michael was staring at his hands, his jaw tight. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. Both, I said, deciding there was no point in pretending anymore. The trust was established by Catherine before she died. It protects assets for Michael's future, assets that remain separate from marital property. Sienna's laugh was cold, sharp. Marital property? You mean you made sure I'd never have any claim to this family's money? I made sure the legacy Catherine and I built would go to our son, exactly as she intended. Dad, Michael finally spoke, his voice strained. You should have told me about this. I had a right to know. The pain in his voice cut deeper than any of Sienna's accusations. This was what I'd feared most. Not her anger, but his hurt, his sense of betrayal. You're right, I said, meeting his eyes. I should have explained earlier. Your mother and I set up protections because she'd watched her own mother lose everything after her father died. She made me promise to make sure that never happened to you. The right time? Sienna repeated mockingly. Or were you waiting to see if I'd leave, hoping Michael's marriage would fail so you could keep your precious control? I was waiting to see if you'd show your true intentions, I said quietly. And today, when you tried to break into my storage unit with bolt cutters, you did exactly that. Her face flushed red. I have a right to know what affects my husband's future. You have no rights to assets you didn't earn and never will, I replied. Everything in that storage unit, every document, every protection Catherine put in place, it's all designed to ensure our son is taken care of by people who love him, not by people who love what he represents. That's not true, Michael said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. Sienna turned to him, her expression softening into something that might have been convincing if I hadn't spent 3 years watching her perform. Michael, honey, your father has been manipulating you your entire life. Don't you see? He's trying to control you even now, trying to come between us. I can see perfectly well, I said. I can see that 6 months after the wedding, you convinced Michael to co-sign a loan for an $82,000 vehicle. A vehicle you picked out, that you drive, that he makes payments on. Michael's head snapped up. How do you know the exact amount? Because I pay attention to my son. I notice when he stops talking about saving for a house, because suddenly all his money is going somewhere else. I notice when he starts looking tired, because he's working overtime to cover expenses that shouldn't exist. We needed a reliable car, Sienna protested. You needed a BMW? I kept my voice level. Michael, how much are the monthly payments? He hesitated, then said quietly, $1,400. And what were you paying for your Honda before that? $450, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. So you're paying an extra $950 a month because Sienna needed a luxury vehicle. I turned back to her. What else did you need? The Peloton bike that cost $3,000? The furniture for the condo that cost $12,000? The vacation to Turks and Caicos last year that cost $9,000? I was building a nice life for us, Sienna said, but her voice had taken on a defensive edge. You were spending money that wasn't yours and trying to figure out how to access money you'd never earned. I pulled out my phone and opened an email I'd prepared before leaving Halifax. I spoke with James Chen this afternoon. He confirmed that the prenuptial agreement you signed before the wedding is completely valid and enforceable in Ontario. Sienna went very still. What prenuptial agreement? The one you signed 3 days before the wedding. The one James walked you through in his office on Bay Street. The one that specifies in clear language that all assets held in the family trust remain separate property, and that in the event of divorce, you have no claim to any premarital assets. I watched the blood drain from her face as memory caught up with rage. She'd signed it, barely reading it, probably thinking it was just standard paperwork, that she'd have years to work around it. You tricked me, she whispered. I protected my son. Michael was staring at both of us like we were strangers. I don't understand. Sienna, you knew about the prenup. We talked about it. I thought it was just a formality, she said, her voice rising. I didn't think your father was trying to cut me out of everything. Everything that was never yours to begin with, I corrected. The house in North York is held in trust. The investment portfolio is held in trust. My life insurance policy names Michael as the sole beneficiary, with the payout going directly into the trust. Even if something happened to me tomorrow, you wouldn't see a cent. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael looked like I'd slapped him. Sienna looked like she wanted to slap me. So that's it, Sienna said finally. You've made sure that even if I stay married to your son for 50 years, I'll never really be part of this family. You were never trying to be part of this family, I said. You were trying to take what you thought you could get. I pulled out the leather journal from my bag, the one I'd been keeping for 3 years. I've documented everything, Sienna. Every manipulation attempt, every red flag, every calculated move. I opened to a marked page. October 15th, 3 years ago. First dinner. Quote, these North York properties must be worth over $1 million now. You assessed the house value before you'd even tasted the food. I flipped forward. March 23rd, 2 years ago. You suggested Michael should ask me about financial planning and estate assets. You'd been dating 8 months. Another page. July 9th, 18 months ago. You posted Instagram photos of my living room, tagged the location as if this was your house. You were building a narrative of wealth to your followers. That's insane, Sienna said, but her voice was shaking. You've been stalking me, documenting my life like some obsessed creep. I've been protecting my son from someone I suspected was using him. I pulled out printouts from my bag. These are screenshots of your Instagram direct messages. You don't know this, but when you connected to my Wi-Fi here, you agreed to network terms that allow me to monitor activity. It's in the disclosure that pops up when you first connect. Her eyes widened with panic. You messaged your friend Amber 6 months ago, quote, the old man is loaded but so paranoid. Michael doesn't even know how much they're worth. Going to take time, but I'll figure it out. Michael made a small sound of distress. And last month, you Googled how to contest a trust in Ontario and spousal rights to inherited property Canada. You've been planning this. Michael. Sienna turned to him, desperation creeping into her voice. Don't let him do this to us. He's trying to destroy our marriage. But Michael was staring at his phone now, and I could see he was scrolling through something. Your Instagram messages with Amber, he said, his voice hollow. I can see them on your iPad. It's synced to your account. Sienna, there are dozens of messages about money, about how you were going to convince me to pressure my dad to sign over the house, about how you just needed to play the long game. She lunged for his phone, but he stood up, backing away. Oh my God, this one from last week. Richard's going to Halifax for 5 days. Perfect time to check that storage unit he's always so secretive about. Once I know it's in there, I'll know how to play this. I can explain, Sienna started, but there was no explanation that could cover this. Were you ever actually looking for work? Michael asked, his voice breaking. You told me you were applying to marketing positions. You said you had interviews. I was building our life together, she said weakly. You haven't worked a single day since the wedding, I said. You told Michael you were job hunting, but you've spent 3 years spending his money while contributing nothing. Michael sank back onto the sofa, his head in his hands. This was my son learning that the woman he'd pledged his life to had been playing a role, had seen him as a means to an end rather than a partner. I think you need to leave, Michael said quietly. What? I think you need to pack your things and leave. Go stay with your sister or get a hotel room. I need you out so I can think. This is half my home, Sienna said, her voice cold now, all pretense dropped. We're married. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I said, the condo is in Michael's name only. He bought it 2 years before he met you. You have no legal claim to it. Her head whipped toward me. You made sure of that too? I know every asset my son owns and how it's titled. That's not control, Sienna. That's being a careful parent. She looked between us, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She'd lost, and she knew it. If I leave now, I'm not coming back, she said. A final desperate threat. Michael met her eyes, tears streaming down his face. I know. The sound of Sienna's suitcase wheels on the hardwood echoed through the house like a death knell. It was nearly midnight, and I sat in the living room while Michael stood at the top of the stairs, watching his wife pack 3 years of marriage into 2 bags. Drawers slammed. I heard her angry footsteps moving from the bedroom to the bathroom, back and forth. She was taking her time, maybe hoping Michael would crack, would tell her to stop. He didn't. When she finally came down, she looked nothing like the polished woman who'd manipulated her way into our lives. Her hair was messy, her face blotchy and streaked with mascara. She dragged both suitcases behind her, refusing to look at either of us. At the door, she paused. Michael, I need money for a hotel. He pulled out his wallet slowly and handed her 5 $20 bills. $100. Not enough for more than a night at a budget motel. She stared at the money like it was an insult. After 3 years? Your bank card works. There's about $1,400 in our joint account. Take what you need. What I need, she laughed bitterly, is for you to wake up and realize your father has poisoned you against me. She grabbed the doorknob and yanked it open. The November air rushed in, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and coming winter. She stood there for a moment, and I thought maybe she'd try one more manipulation, find some crack in his resolve. Instead, she just left. The door clicked shut, and seconds later, we heard her BMW start and pull away into the Toronto night. The silence that filled the house was deafening. Michael stood frozen, staring at the closed door. Then his shoulders started to shake, and he crumpled onto the bottom step of the staircase, his face in his hands. The sobs came deep and wrenching. I moved to sit beside him, and he turned into me like he was a child again. I held my 67-year-old body around my 38-year-old son while he broke apart. I'm so stupid, Dad, he choked out. How did I not see it? You loved her. Love makes us see what we want to see. 3 years. 3 years wasted on someone who was just using me. Not wasted, I said firmly. You learned something about people, about yourself, about what you really want. That's not waste, son. That's life. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. You tried to warn me. I could feel it, your disapproval. And I told myself you were just being overprotective, that you couldn't let go. But you saw her from the start. I've had more years to learn about people, and I had the advantage of not being in love with her." He let out a shaky laugh. "Mom would have seen it too, wouldn't she? The first time Sienna walked through that door, your mother would have had her figured out." We sat there on the stairs for a long moment. Then Michael said, "Tell me about the storage unit. Tell me everything Mom set up. No more secrets." So I did. We sat there, and I explained every detail, how Catherine had spent her final months planning for a future she wouldn't be part of. How she'd worked with James Chen to create something unbreakable, specifically designed to protect Michael from exactly this kind of person. The trust holds the house, all the investments Mom and I built together, and the life insurance policy. It's worth about $1.8 million total. Michael's eyes widened. That much? Your mother was brilliant with money. We lived modestly, invested carefully. The house alone is worth about $900,000 now. The rest is in diversified investments that have grown over the years. And it all comes to me when I die, or when I choose to transfer control. Your mother and I originally planned for your 40th birthday. But after tonight, I think we should sit down with James sooner. You should understand exactly what you have and how to protect it going forward." "The prenup," Michael said. "Would it have held up if we'd stayed married?" "Absolutely." James made it ironclad. "Even if you'd been married 50 years, the assets in the trust would have remained separate property. She could never have touched them. That's why she was so desperate to get into the storage unit. She'd been trying to figure out what we had for months, I'm sure. The journal I kept, I documented every time she asked questions about finances, every time she tried to manipulate you into pressuring me. It's all there." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Can I see it? The journal?" "Tomorrow. We'll go to the storage unit together, and you can read everything." We talked until nearly 3 in the morning. About Catherine, about the protections she'd put in place, about the 3 years Michael had spent with someone who'd never truly loved him. "Do you think she ever cared about me at all?" he finally asked. "Even a little?" That question broke my heart. Maybe in her own way. But it wasn't the kind of love that builds a life. It was the kind that has conditions and exit strategies. The next morning, we drove downtown to the storage facility on King Street. The manager, a kind older man named Rajesh, greeted us with relief. "Mr. Morrison, I'm so glad you're back. That woman yesterday, she was very insistent, very angry when I wouldn't let her in." "You did exactly right, Rajesh. Thank you." I punched in the code 7352, Catherine's birthday, March 7th, 1952. The lock clicked open. The unit wasn't large, just 3 meters by 3 meters, but it was organized meticulously. Filing cabinets along one wall, labeled clearly, financial records, property documents, legal papers, insurance policies. But what drew Michael's attention was the other wall. Shelves holding carefully preserved photo albums, boxes of Catherine's belongings, her jewelry box, her favorite books, her collection of small watercolor paintings she'd done as a hobby. "You kept everything," Michael said, his voice thick. "I couldn't let go. This was my space to remember her. That's the real reason I never wanted anyone here. Not just the documents, but this. I wasn't ready to share." Michael walked to the shelves and picked up a photo album. He opened it to a random page, and there was Catherine, maybe 30 years old, laughing at the camera at Niagara Falls, young and healthy and full of life. I forget sometimes what she looked like before she got sick. She was extraordinary, brilliant and funny, and so stubborn. When she decided something was right, there was no changing her mind. He set the album down and opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were folders in Catherine's neat handwriting, and in the very front, a sealed envelope with Michael's name. "What's this?" "A letter. She wrote it 2 weeks before she died. Told me to give it to you when you were ready." His hands trembled as he opened it. Several pages covered in Catherine's handwriting. His eyes moved across the words, and I watched tears begin to fall. He read in silence while I stood there, remembering the day Catherine had written those words. How weak she'd been, how determined. When he finished, he looked up at me, She knew. Even then, she knew I'd need protection. Your mother understood the world, Michael. The good and the bad, and she loved you enough to prepare for both. 6 months had passed since that November night. 6 months since Sienna had walked out with her 2 suitcases and $100. 6 months of healing, of rebuilding, of learning what life looked like on the other side of deception. The divorce had been swift. Thanks to the prenuptial agreement, relatively painless. Sienna had tried at first to challenge it, hiring a lawyer who took one look at the documents and advised her to accept the settlement offered. She walked away with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage: her personal belongings and a car loan she couldn't afford. Last I heard, she'd moved to Vancouver, posting Instagram photos of sunset views and yoga poses, already hunting for her next target. Michael had blocked her number after she'd called 32 times in the first week, alternating between begging him to reconsider and screaming about what a mistake he was making. He never wavered. It was Sunday, and it had become our day again. Every Sunday, Michael came to the house in North York for dinner. Sometimes we cooked together, attempting Catherine's recipes. Sometimes we ordered Swiss chalet and watched the Leafs game. But mostly, we talked. "I met someone," Michael said, cutting into the chicken I'd actually managed not to burn. I looked up, surprised but pleased. Nothing serious yet. Just coffee a few times. Her name is Rachel. She's a teacher at a school in Scarborough. We met at that conference I went to last month. And he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. She insisted on paying for her own coffee. Said she has a rule about splitting things equally from the start. I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Smart woman. I told her everything. About Sienna, about the divorce, about why it ended. Figured if that scared her off, better to know now. What did she say? She said her best friend went through something similar. Got manipulated by someone who saw dollar signs instead of a person. She understood. We ate in comfortable silence. Then Michael set down his fork. "I want to apologize, Dad, for not trusting you, for choosing Sienna over your concerns all those times, for making you feel like you couldn't be honest with me. You don't need to apologize for loving someone, even if they didn't deserve it. But I do need to apologize for not seeing what was right in front of me, for being so desperate to prove I could make my own choices that I ignored obvious red flags." He paused. "I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately, about what she must have gone through, making all those plans while she was dying. She was terrified," I admitted. "Some nights she'd wake up crying, worried about what would happen to you." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out Catherine's letter, now creased from being read dozens of times. She wrote something that keeps coming back to me. She said, "Real love doesn't demand access to bank accounts. Real love is built in small moments, in shared struggles, in choosing each other even when it's hard." She was right. Sienna never chose you when it was hard. But I learned from it, he said. I learned what I don't want, and I learned I'd rather be alone than be with someone who's only there for what I can provide. I raised my glass. "Your mother would be proud of you." He clinked his glass against mine. The wine was from a bottle Catherine had bought 20 years ago, saved for a special occasion. This felt right. "I've been thinking about the trust," Michael said. "About what we should do with part of it." "What do you mean?" "Mom wanted me to have security, to have choices. But I've been working in finance for 16 years now. I've built my own career, my own savings. I don't need all of it to survive. Your mother wanted you to be comfortable. I know. But I also think she'd want the money to mean something. What if we set up a scholarship fund for kids who lose a parent to cancer? Help them pay for university the way Mom's trust has helped me have security." I felt tears prick my eyes. She would have loved that idea. We could call it the Catherine Morrison Memorial Scholarship. Keep enough in the trust for the house and a safety net, but use some of it to help others. Your mother would be so incredibly proud of you right now. We spent the rest of the evening planning. By the time Michael left, we'd outlined a scholarship that would help 5 students a year, kids who'd lost parents and needed support to pursue education. As I watched his taillights disappear down the street, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but something deeper. The knowledge that I'd kept my promises. that Catherine's love had transcended death, that our son was finally free to build the life he deserved. The storage unit downtown still held all those documents, all those protections, but what it really contained wasn't about money anymore. It was about memory, about honor, about a love story that had started 45 years ago and was still writing its final chapters. I walked back inside, past the photo of Catherine I kept on the mantel. She was 35 in that picture, her smile bright and genuine, her eyes full of life. "We did it," I told her quietly. "He's okay. He's going to be just fine." And I could almost hear her response, that mix of relief and pride she always showed when our plans worked out. She'd been gone 12 years, but she'd never really left. She was in every protected asset, in every lesson Michael had learned, in every Sunday dinner we shared. Sienna had walked away with nothing because she'd never understood what really mattered. She'd seen the house, the accounts, the investments, and thought that was the treasure. She'd missed the real wealth entirely. As I climbed the stairs that night, I thought about Michael's new beginning, about Rachel, the teacher who paid for her own coffee, about the scholarship that would help kids who'd lost what Michael had lost. The lock on the storage unit was secure, but what it protected wasn't really about documents anymore. It was about love that had outlasted death, about wisdom passed down, about character that couldn't be bought or sold. And in the end, that was the only legacy that truly mattered.